Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Good morning, Mel. How are you? Or good afternoon.
Hi, Sri. I'm well, very well. Home in Connecticut, and happy to be here.
Happy to be here, and happy July 4th. I know we're 2 days past July 4th, but good to have you back in our home state. So I know the last time we talked, I think maybe 10 days ago, you were still in Missoula, Montana, and I think there were a couple of states that we have in the blog. One is Idaho, and the other one is Oregon. So quickly want to talk about some of your experiences going from Missoula, Montana to Idaho, and the pictures are just incredible. The vegetation seems to have changed significantly, and the Idaho side, as you alluded, was quite lush green and forests and things like that. So maybe let's talk a little bit about your experience going from Missoula to Idaho, and then we'll cover the Oregon piece as well.
Yeah. So I left Missoula, about 2 weeks ago now, and headed into Idaho, crossing Lolo Pass, which is about 7,600 feet. A tough climb, beautiful, beautiful descent into this temperate rainforest, the easternmost temperate rainforest in the continental United States. And just spectacular trees, cedars and redwoods and pines, and just just very, very green, very lush, very different from Wyoming and certainly Montana in terms of how moist the environment is there, and great rivers. Idaho is we 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 had an amazing experience on a bunch of different, riding along rivers, and then I mentioned the rafting on the river. So yeah, great time. Idaho's beautiful. I think I came away thinking that Idaho, of all the states, was the most, at least to me, spoke to me in terms of its vegetation and mountains and rivers.
Yeah, the one thing I did see here on your blog post was the fact that you had not just the creeks but also the mountains, the Bitterroot Mountains range, and then a lot of the trees that you mentioned were close to 1,500 years old, and seems like the picture that you have there of the campground. But there was also you're close to a lodge where you talked about the lodge itself looks really beautiful, gorgeous, just looking at it. And then looks like you came and played some pool as well.
Yeah,
So yeah, let's talk about that.
yeah. So interestingly, when we crossed Lolo Pass on the climb up, we started seeing fire fighting vehicles heading over the pass. And when we got to the top of the pass, we learned that there was, in fact, an active fire about 31 miles beyond the pass. We were going to get there the next day. We stayed at the Loxa Lodge, which you just mentioned. It's beautiful, beautiful log cabin. Very, very large restaurant and bar, and they had cabins there that you could stay at. We actually were staying about a mile away in a primitive national forest campground, which means you don't have showers. So we were able to go up to Loxa Lodge and use their showers for a fee, which was really nice. 'Cause it's always good to get a shower after you've been riding for. I think we rode about 70 miles that day. Um, and then the following day, we actually passed this area where the fire was had been active. Actually, by the time we got there, it was mostly under control, and it was not visible. The area where the fire was located was probably about 5 miles from the road, but all of the staging of manpower and vehicles and equipment was going on the road that we were on, which runs along the Loxa River, and it's pretty impressive to see how much resources are brought to these fights of fires, and we had seen a lot of evidence of fires that had happened historically, but nothing active. That was our first encounter with an active fire. We could smell it very, very little in one location, but otherwise didn't really get exposed to it.
Yeah, the other thing you mentioned, which kind of you talked about towards the end of that blog, was the fact that the how the budget cuts have severely limited the resources, and also even from a staff and services from the standpoint of forest services, and that's sad to see. And I mean, in the sense that um, there are concerns about their job, there are concerns about budget cuts and staff cuts. So that is not a great thing to see, especially when we have these such a great, vast national treasure that we have in our parks.
Yeah. We've been reading a lot about it in the legislation that was adopted this week, as well as other legislation that's been adopted since the Trump administration began to cut federal expenses. We've heard that national parks are being affected by budget cuts. But we hadn't really heard directly anything until we got to the Lolo Pass Visitor Center, which we had been told was this amazing visitor center with a exhibit on the forest and what a temperate rainforest really means. And we were looking forward to seeing it, and we got there and it was closed. And there was a ranger standing outside that was able to answer questions. And she explained that because of budget cuts, the visitor center would be at least currently closed except on Saturdays and Sundays. We were there midweek. And then when I started talking to her a little bit about the effect of these budget cuts, and what she essentially said that the Forest Service, particularly the front sort of facing portion of the Forest Service that helps people navigate the forests and use them for recreational as well as natural resources, um, is being heavily impacted by budget cuts, and she was worried about her job, and it sounds like and that the Forest Service is taking a hit, and we know already the national parks are taking a hit, and it's kind of sad because I understand the need to save funds, but we also have these resources that need to be taken care of because they're treasures
Yep.
for people to enjoy, and not only people but companies use them for they lumber in these areas. There are electrical power plants along the rivers in these in the national forest. So it's a big impact, and
Hmm.
came right. We faced it directly by not being able to see this display on the rainforest.
Yeah, I think that we did see, the number of employees that got their jobs either eliminated due to uh, the staff cuts, due to the budget cuts, or even to, like, people just because of the funding, like you said, right? And then what's critical here that, that we need to know about is that you mentioned the timber production, and but also there's also the whole thing about what do we do when there's a forest fire? I mean, how do you, the wildfire prevention there, and then a lot of the trail maintenance. Who's going to do all that stuff? And the restoration of all these lands. I mean, and it's funny, like watching, you know, I think we've both watched, I think, called the Ken Burns thing on the national parks, and when you see like what it took to build these treasures, and just to see where we are right now, just like protecting our most natural resources should be the most paramount thing that we need to think about. But that's a very sad, uh, sad state of affairs. But I know the fact that you saw this in person kind of resonates. Usually, you see this in the news, and but I think for you to actually witness it in person, I mean, that kind of tells about, it's a very cautionary tale.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So, and then from that point, you kind of moved on to Montana, to Oregon from Idaho. I know you went through a lot of the Hell's Canyon National Recreation Area for quite a number of days, and but these seems like this region is slightly different from what you saw in Idaho.
Yeah. So and I want to get back to the river experience that we had because that was pretty dramatic. But as you um, ride across Idaho and you start to lose elevation um, and
Okay.
moving west, you travel out of this rainforest and the environment becomes super dry. It's very prairie like, still mountainous, but a lot of scrub brush, sagebrush, dry land. Looks more prairie like, and it becomes totally brown. So you go from these green forests on the western end or on the eastern end of Idaho to the western end, which is desert like. And the way we crossed into Oregon was along the Snake River is the actual border between Idaho and Oregon, and the Snake River in that location runs through Hell's Canyon. Hell's Canyon is the deepest canyon in the United States, deeper even than the Grand Canyon. It's about 7,600 feet from the peaks along the ridge line on either side of the canyon to the bottom of the canyon, and it is one of the hottest places in the Northwest. In fact, when we were there. It was 55 degrees, but we stopped in this general store, and the guy was telling us that the week before it had been 100 degrees,
I
and
saw you mention that in the blog. Yes. Yeah.
oh my gosh, and we were freezing. We were literally we had to climb two passes to get into the canyon. It was freezing going up, which is unusual because usually you're sweating, and then coming down into the canyon, it's about a 5 mile descent, and you just couldn't go that fast because we were shivering. It was like 40 degrees, and if you're doing 30 miles an hour, the wind chill takes it down to like below freezing, and so you had to be pretty careful about making sure that your hands work because the brakes become very important on those descents. But Hell's Canyon is just spectacular. It's like a 50-mile long canyon, and the recreation area goes all the way into halfway into the canyon. We crossed over the river on a dam, actually, Oxbow Dam, and then you're in Oregon, and again the land is super dry. You're still in the canyon. We were in the canyon for another day and a half. We left the canyon just as we were approaching Baker City, and it's total wilderness. There's like in the 100 miles from the border of Idaho to Baker City. I think we went through maybe two towns,
Wow.
and even were tiny. One was halfway where we stayed. We stayed for the night. It's called Halfway Oregon, and then we got to Baker City, and I mentioned in my blog in Baker, just outside of Baker City, actually in the recreation area, is this amazing museum called the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. That's run by the Bureau of Land Management. That was just fantastic. Really, really
Hmm.
good explanation of what it was like to be on the Oregon Trail. We had been following the Oregon Trail since Missouri, so we had a good sense of kind of the terrain that these people went
Hmm.
through. Obviously, they were going through it, on Conestoga wagons. Many people didn't make it. They died on the way. Some people turned around because they couldn't handle the adversity, either because of the weather or because of attacks. There were thieves along the Oregon Trail, and so it was a very interesting exhibit to see, and in some respects, felt like we had faced maybe not the same adversity, but we had faced a lot of adversity in terms of dealing with rain and weather and difficulties within the group, which the museum mentioned was always a challenge, and
Hmm.
so that was very cool. It's way up on a hill. It's what was the name of the hill? Maybe Flagstaff Hill. I mentioned it in my blog, and from there you actually look down into the valley to see Baker City.
Yeah. The other thing you'd mentioned was the pictures that you posted on the Hell's Canyon are just incredible. Just seeing the nature's beauty is so amazing. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You said the pictures tell the story. I do think that I do recommend folks going and checking that out. And then you also did the looks like you got a chance to do some river rapiding on class 3 and class 4 rapid, some of the highlights of the cross country journey. So
Yeah, on the Loxa River, some of the Loxa River is one of very few undammed wild rivers in the world. So its flow is dependent entirely on snow melt. And in April and May, we were there in June, and it was still pretty wild then. But in April and May, it's among the most challenging wild rivers in the world, and it's just series of class 5 rapids. While we were there, it was more class 3, 4, and 5 rapids. Being there in mid June, the melt has diminished a little bit, but it's still the class 4 rapids that we went through. The whole thing was just incredible. We were with a very
hmm,
experienced outfitter called Three Rivers, that's located in Lolo Pass, and we did a 10-mile rafting, and with a very, very experienced guide, very interesting. He was, as we went through, when we weren't in the challenging rapids, he would be telling us about the forest and about the animal life and different places that he guides. He guides on the Snake River. He guides on the Loxa, and his whole life that's what he's done, and very experienced, and navigated us through these incredibly challenging rapids. And the one class 4 rapid we went through was a series of waterfalls that goes over about 100 yards, and each of them is about 6 feet drop, and there's like six of them that in sequence, and it was interesting. He tied the raft up to a tree along the shore before we went into that rapid, and then walked the shore of the river to look at the entire rapid so that he could figure out what was the best track to go through so that we would be safe. And we had to paddle, and then there were points where the boat was literally going underwater, and we had to kind of dive into the boat so that we didn't fall out of the boat. And then we had to paddle as we came out of that, and it was really a treat, and just beautiful. Not only because we had been riding along the river and sort of experiencing the river from the side, but to be in the river, and then we took that basically on the way to our campground. So it wasn't out of the way. It was kind of interesting that we converted from traveling by bicycle to traveling by river raft.
yeah. So no, I think I mean Idaho definitely seems to have left a huge impression during this cross country journey. And on from Idaho, you moved on to the Oregon. I know we jumped ahead to Oregon a little too early, um, but from there, that's when you saw the vegetation probably changed as well, a little more very desert-like, other than the lush green um, landscapes that you encountered in Idaho. So let's quickly talk about the Oregon. How your experience in getting
Yeah.
into Oregon
So,
was.
as I mentioned in my blog, so we got to Oregon. We were in halfway, and then we were in Baker City. And in Baker City, I was asked to leave the tour, and so I didn't get to see as much of Oregon as I had planned. I'm working on
Hmm.
plans to get back there and complete the journey. Um, But what I did see of Oregon to begin with was very, very dry. I know that it changes as you get closer to the coast, and the buddies that I rode with, who kept in touch with me as they completed the trip to the Pacific, sent me pictures, and so things do change. I think as you go further west in Oregon, you get to more of a verdant landscape. But I departed in I departed in Baker City, and that was it. 3,400 miles. Got to hit every state that I had intended. The only thing that I didn't get to finish was the journey through the state of Oregon to the Pacific Ocean. But it's So that's on my that little piece is still left as incomplete on my bucket list.
Yeah, I think when I read through that as well, but I do think that the one thing I got away from just reading through all the blogs and you sharing this journey, and I certainly think that just even other people having listened to some of these blogs, and I go back and listen to our conversations, and I learned a lot about the country through you. And I think, I think if there's anything, I look at, like you said, right, there is a part of the unfinished business part, but there is like what you have to be proud about what you've achieved over the last 3,400 miles. And I think you certainly inspired not just me, but a lot of people, and also a lot of the stories that you were say really resonated. Whether the whole thing about the tribe, I've had a chance to talk to my kids about that, and then explain to them about everything that you read in the books. Is you don't hear about a lot of things that you don't know. So things like that, right? Yes, it is unfinished business, but I think what I'm more proud about is the achievement that you have made and the goodness of your heart to the people along the way, and learning about the other people and telling the story of America through your eyes, with through your writings and through your speech is what is more important. That's what I'll take away from this. And I think there is that other part of it. Yes, that will happen, and I'm
Yeah,
confident.
I I mean that's great to hear you say that. That's what my goal was in writing the blog and in talking to you was to share my experience, share what I learned about the country, share the emotions that I was feeling as I encountered, whether it was the good or the bad, as we've talked about, and I'm proud of what I accomplished. It was a huge undertaking from the very beginning of training, starting in December. Not that I've been training my whole life for this trip, but from
Mhm.
really diligently training hard, starting in December, right through the winter. A lot of cold, windy rides in Connecticut before we left in April, and then being able to share it with friends and family, colleagues, through my writings and through your podcasts, I think just made it that much more rich for me, and I'm hopeful for those who followed along.
Yeah, and I think it's not just about that, right? I think you definitely, as you were kind of talking about a lot of these, your journey through different states, whether it's from starting from Maryland to Pennsylvania to West Virginia to Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Idaho, and then eventually in Oregon. But like I said, for you to be able to touch all these states and then tell the story differently, whether it's the story about the sixth generation of those, uh, the individuals who served the country, or the story about the tribe, the story about the Second Amendment, where you went to this one, or story about one of those artists, and a barefooted artist. I think a lot of these things, resonate in my mind. Like you said, right? I mean, I think, yep, you wish it went all the way, but like I said, I think, thank you for sharing this journey as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great.
and like I said, like you always said the same thing every time. You said there's no better way to see this on a two wheeler than and then being in a air conditioned car, and where it's temperature controlled. Where you went today, even this time, you went from like 100-degree to a 55-degree one. So, or you're rolling down 60 miles in hairpin bends and things like that. So again, thank you again for doing that. Like you said, right? I think. Um, any last minute thoughts like you want to talk about? And as part of the journey, you learned a lot about America. What did you learn about yourself and your brother, for example? Because I think you've always shared that you wanted to go with your brother through cross country. So
Yeah, so I learned that we have a lot in common. That we share a passion for cycling. I also learned that we're very different. I was more anxious to go slowly and observe and to encounter and to see, and he was much more interested in moving faster and getting to the next destination. So that's a difference, and that's a different. Each person approaches these journey in their own personal way. So I learned to be hopefully flexible about that, flexible about the different values and the different goals that people had in the trip. I learned that I can be difficult, and that it's important to be as flexible as you can be in a large group. Um, and I learned that I'm capable of achieving still at my age. I'm 69 years old. I'm capable of achieving um, mammoth physical accomplishments, which me feel really good because it's been kind of a mantra in my life that I've been training for 70. I always thought about it from the time I've been in my 20s. I always said I'm training for 70. I wanted to be able to, when I hit the age of 70, do the things that I did when I was 20. And I think I found out that I think I got there, which
Yep.
makes me feel really good. I'm feeling really lucky. I've been, for the most part, very healthy in my life, and I feel really lucky that I can still do the kinds of bike riding or hiking or tennis or whatever that I've been doing since I was a kid. So that's
Yeah.
a blessing.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I think, you
One
kind of
other thing I have to mention, and I learned that I really, really miss my home. I miss my my lady friend Sheila. I missed my kids a lot. 10 weeks is a long way, a long time to be away, and I really, really appreciate the beauty of Connecticut, and the people of Connecticut, and just what a great community we live in. And not everybody's around the country has that. A lot of blown out towns across the country that look like they will never be the same. And we live in an amazing, amazing place where there's lots to do, lots to see. You can buy things. There's shopping. You go to some of these towns. There's nothing. There's zero.
right.
And they're hurting. So I think we're pretty lucky out here in Connecticut. So that's
Yeah.
another thing that just really
Yeah. No,
makes
I
me.
think, like you said, right? I think it is this, right? You said when I asked you the question about what did you learn about you, I mean, I think by nature, right? Um, Human beings are always going to be complicated, but the also that, we have things that also make us do things that are beyond what we are capable of, which is where you push yourself to get there, which is amazing to hear. I think pushing your physical limitations. I don't think you push your physical limitations, especially how mentally you have to be so fit for this thing. I think more than your physical, I think it's the mental fortitude that really resonates here because I think without the mental part, the physical part is something you've done it so many years. You've done this for since you were 20, like you said, or since you first got on a bike.
Yeah.
So, but I think that the ability for you to traverse this nation, the ability to keep your, like you said, like, missing your family, missing your friends, missing the state, and but also keeping your sanity in check while you're going through it and keeping that being mentally strong throughout this journey is very important. So and I think I really appreciate that part of it because I think when I just take like, how many people can really do this thing? There's not many people, Mel. So I think what you have done is you have to be very proud of it. I'm proud of it. And, I think, uh, I think when we all get down for a beer with all our tennis group, we'll sit and share those stories as well. But I really appreciate you, kind of talking through this one. I'm going to talk this about the journey across America. That's it. It's a journey, and life is always a journey, and we continue to move on. That's the way I see it. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that as well. So
Thank you.
so thank thank you so much. Let me just pause recording, but I really appreciate it and have enjoy the rest of the day.
You too. Thank you. And look forward. Maybe we can do a Thursday night up at Granby Tennis and get together and
Sure,
I can share some stories and some more pictures.
sure, absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening. Primo will be back soon.